How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Great. Thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. My name is Adam Boynton. I work for Sentinel Technologies. I've worked in IT for over 20 years now. And so I've focused on security for the last portion of my career, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I definitely know a lot about it. And here today to try to make this as interactive as possible. By all means, I am wide open to any questions you guys have. It doesn't have to be security related. It could be computer related, whatever. I'd like you to get the most out of this. I've put together a small presentation, just kind of online security best practices, email best practices, and things like that. And by all means, if you guys have questions as the slides come up, please raise your hand or holler, and I'll be happy to address them as we go along. You don't have to hold them to the end. I want this to be beneficial for everybody here that's attending, and by all means, I hope this is helpful. So we'll start off. There's a lot of reasons people go online. A lot of it is they like to participate in social media. That's becoming very, very popular now. I think pretty much most people have some type of social media account of one way or the other, Facebook or Instagram or whatnot. A lot of folks use going online to keep in touch with loved ones, be it email, chatting, video conferencing, things like that. Going online is a great place to meet people, or even to meet people to date. It's obviously gained a lot of popularity in the last decade. I'm sure everyone here has probably done some type of online banking, shopping, even investing. Obviously, making travel arrangements is huge. I know I book all my travel through online. Getting medical advice, obviously sometimes that can go awry when you have a symptom and you go on the internet search engines like Google and you find out that you have some terrible thing when really you don't, but you can kind of go down the rabbit hole with that. So a lot of times they recommend just going online to reference your doctor's office for your medical records and things like that. Sharing and viewing pictures, that's obviously huge with a lot of folks, especially I'm sure a lot of you have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, so you love to see their pictures and interact with them. Exploring and sharing political views, and then obviously there's pretty much sky's the limit. The internet is, just kind of a Wild West frontier. Some basic safety tips and privacy tips that I would recommend. When you do go online and you have to enter a password of some type, and they want you to set it for the first time, I always recommend using a strong, unique password with long, many characters. A lot of times this can be a little bit cumbersome because you've got to remember multiple passwords for things. And so what I recommend to people is if you create a password, try to make it something that's either a saying that you use or you're familiar with, or a good example would be like the word password, for example. So you would start with like a capital P. You could use the @ symbol for the A, and then maybe $2 for your S's, and then maybe the O's you could swap out with zeros, and then throw an exclamation point in the end. Just get creative with it, make it so it's, yes?
Along that line, I like to use the words that you said a saying, but also the words of a song.
Yeah, that too. Something you can remember fairly easy.
The words of scripture.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They actually recommend that now more than kind of an encrypted password like the password thing. But a lot of times people don't want to type out that long, saying.
Not totally long, but let's say Mary had a little lamb. Then it would be capital M.
Yep.
H.
Yep.
A. L. L.
Yep. Yeah.
So it doesn't really spell a word, but you have a way of remembering.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, if you can do that coupled with maybe a date or some number of significance, and then I always recommend throwing an odd character like an exclamation point or an @ symbol, or just a different character like a hashtag symbol after it, just to kind of add a little more complexity to it. Another thing that I would recommend is using privacy settings. So if you go on your computer and you're using your web browser, a lot of times you can choose certain levels of privacy, and so you go in there and make sure that those are enabled. A lot of times, with social media and everybody posting things now, we definitely recommend thinking about what you're going to post, because what happens is if people, they can obtain certain information from you. Like there's a lot of times, there's a very popular trend with people saying, what was the first car you owned, or where were you born, or what was your maiden name, and they act it like it's a quiz. But what they're actually doing is they're out there fishing for your information. And so once they know your first car, they can try to get into an account you have, and a lot of times they have security questions associated with the account. And sometimes some people choose, what was your first car? Well, right there, they were able to go online, find that you said my first car was a Pontiac Le Mans or whatever it may be. And so now they know that one question. So they have a potential to be able to get into your account by harnessing that information. Another one is think before you click. There's a lot of malicious websites out there, as well as malicious emails that you may receive that look legitimate, but then they're really not. I mean, this is called spoofing. And so what it'll do is it'll come across, it'll look like your bank, but what it is, it's really not your bank. It's meant to look that way, and then there's a link in it. And what I recommend, if you're on a computer, you can take your mouse and move it over that link, and what it'll do is a little thing will pop up and it'll show you where that link's going to take you before you click on it. And the beauty of that is, like, say you bank with Chase. So if Chase, they wouldn't email you anyways, but let's say they did, and say, please click this link to verify your account. Well, you can move your mouse to it, and when you move your mouse to it, the box will pop up and it'll say where it's going. And 9 times out of 10, if you get that, it'll say it's going to Russia or Korea or God knows wherever, some malicious place, and they're just trying to steal your information. And then, lastly, if you think you're getting abuse to your email or your computer or whatever, definitely report it. There are not only federal but state agencies, but also staff here that can assist you with that. Correct, Jesse?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So by all means, don't let it go unnoticed. There's tons and tons of bad actors out there preying on folks like you and pretty much the whole general population for that matter. And I always tell everyone, it's like they're fishing with a net. So they throw out a huge net and they're trying to, for 10,000 people, and if they can get 3, then it was successful, because it's very little effort for them to do that. And they just do it over and over and over. And they always trip up a few people along the way. So, I mean, the best thing is just try not to rush through anything, read everything thoroughly, and then, ask somebody if they've seen anything like it before you proceed. Some common scams that I just want to bring to your guys' attention. There's always the personal emergency scam, and this can be in the form of someone calling your cell phone and saying that I'm with your daughter, I'm her friend, or your son, and I'm his friend, and they're in the hospital and they're injured. I need $5,000. Can you wire it immediately to us? And a lot of folks, because of the urgency and the seriousness of this call, just immediately knee-jerk react to say, absolutely, I'm not, instead of verifying. I always say, trust but verify. But in this case, I would say, okay, let me call you right back, and then make the phone call to whoever they say they're with, just to verify that. Another one that I see a lot is you owe money scam. I've experienced this myself. I always kind of chuckle because of my background. I'm like, okay, sure, I owe money. They're calling you or emailing you and saying you owe money. 9 times out of 10, if you do owe somebody money, they're going to send you the form of a letter, some certified mail or whatnot. Another great one is the Irs Scam. I've had this one both email as well as phone calls. The IRS will not call you. They will absolutely mail you something. And so if somebody calls you up and say you owe money and they're the IRS, by all means, hang up the phone immediately or delete the email, because they do not communicate with customers either way. Another one that really impacts a lot of folks is the infected computer scam. A lot of people who do this call a number and then they'll say they work for Microsoft. And just to let everyone know, I've worked with Microsoft for over 20 years. Microsoft does not care about individuals and their computers. They don't even care about their corporate customers. They will not call you to let you know that your computer is infected. That is on you. You're kind of the owner of your own computer and responsible for it. But so many people fall for this, and it's really terrible. I had one of my friend's daughters was in her master's program, and she fell for this. She was at the end of her semester. Someone had called her and said that they were from Microsoft, her computer was infected, and they needed to connect to it remotely to clean it up. And instead of calling me, who she's known for her entire life, she just went ahead and let them connect. And what they do is they'll connect into your computer, and then they'll plant software into computers so they can connect again at any other point in time, and then they'll start going through all your files and see if they can find credit card information, personal identifiable information, so social security numbers, addresses, things like that, things they can use to exploit to get money out of you, or just kind of blackmail you down the road. And it's really too bad, because a lot of folks just aren't that tech savvy, and this one tends to work 9 times out of 10. But again, no one's going to contact you and tell you that your computer has a problem. You'll know if your computer has a problem, and then at that point, reach out to somebody here, or if you have a family member who's tech savvy, or take it to one of the local shops that does computer repair and whatnot. Here's some safe shopping and banking tips. Obviously, I'd mentioned phishing earlier, and that's getting an email that's trying to get you to do something, get you to click on something. And my best practice is, if you get an email from someone or someplace and you didn't request it, or you don't recognize it, delete it, because more than likely it's going to be bad. Another one is any offers that you get on email that are too good to be true, more than likely they're too good to be true. So again, just delete it. I would recommend shopping at reputable merchants. So every day there are people out there that are standing up these web stores and putting product in there. And a lot of times they make the prices very attractive. And so people think, oh, this is great, we're gonna go buy these things. Well, you put your credit card in there, they charge it, and then you never see your goods, and now they have all your credit card information, as well as your name, phone number, address, things of that nature. So that's one thing I recommend, is do a little research on a store if you're going to kind of make any online purchases. Another thing I'd recommend is look for secure websites. So the way to define a secure website is in the bar where you type the www. It has an HTTPS before it, and that means secure. So when you go to a website, you want to look for that HTTPS before the www. And so that basically provides an extra layer of security, because your communication between your computer or phone or tablet or however you're on the web with, and that website is 100% secure from your point where you're from to where you're going. Recommend using credit cards if possible. Debit cards and whatnot. The nice thing about credit cards is that if they do compromise your number, you just call the company, and the credit card, it takes the onus of everything, and then they'll refund your money. And I know I've gone through that probably at least a dozen times in my life, and it's a bit of a pain in the neck, but at the same time it's an extra layer of protection. Always recommend reading the fine print and return policies, because a lot of places online, because there may be a smaller shop, will have something in there that if you buy the product, regardless of the condition of it, you own it. And so if you go to try to return it, that can always be a pain in the neck. Another thing I'd recommend doing is monitoring your financial accounts and credit reports online. There's a lot of free applications out there. One would be called Credit Karma. What this does is it'll pull your credit, and it does what they call a soft pull, so it doesn't affect your credit, but it'll list every single account you have. So if somebody has compromised your information and opened up credit card accounts or loans or things like that, you'll be able to see that, and then you can address those if that's the case. Health and wellness, as I mentioned earlier, be careful about Googling symptoms. I know myself, I've had a weird bump one day, and I Googled it and went right down the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden thought I had lymphoma or something like that. So, 9 times out of 10, I would probably have just avoid it altogether and just have a visit with your doctor. Again, only rely on reputable health sites, be it WebMD or maybe a government-related health website. Beware of the ones you haven't heard of, or there aren't anyone affiliated with it as far as a government or reputable medical facility. And then, check with your doctor before taking any advice that you've read online. Irs and Medicare. So obviously this has been a huge scam lately. You want to be aware of any calls or emails from somebody claiming to be those, because as I mentioned earlier, the IRS nor Medicare will be calling you regarding these. The other problem is there's tons of illegitimate websites out there that are claiming that you can file your taxes for free with them. It's nothing wrong with filing your taxes online, but you also got to be very vigilant on who you go with. So I'd recommend, a lot of times, you see like the H&R blocks or the other commercials. So if you're going to do online tax filing, go with one of those. One rule of thumb is don't ever send personal information via email, especially Social Security numbers or Medicare. That's pretty much, I'm sure everyone's aware not to do that. When in doubt, call your local Social Security office or Medicare and ask them, say, I've been getting contacted by your agency, is there any legitimacy behind this? And, they'll be able to research it for you. I don't know how many folks in here have a smartphone, but they tend to be more and more prevalent and common among all sets of society. One thing you want to do is make sure you're downloading reputable apps. The nice thing is if you have an Apple phone, Apple has a very rigorous process, and vetting process for their applications in their App Store. So very rarely do you see apps from the Apple App Store being bad. It's more of the Android phones. They don't tend to vet quite as well as Apple does. Another thing too is for any apps you have, be careful what permissions you give them, because in the fine print of the application, they can have in there that they can have full access to your phone or any of your personal information or contacts, and a lot of folks have had stuff, taken away because of that. One thing I'd recommend too, if you do have a smartphone, turn your location off. Sometimes it's handy when you're doing mapping, but I have mine, so my location only turns on when I'm doing Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever. There's no reason to have that on. Despite what you may think, Google is probably not listening to your conversations. There's some controversy about that. I know Facebook has been in trouble a few times for the application for listening to people's conversation and sending them targeting ads. I had an example of this where my coworkers and I were talking about snow tires one day during lunch, and we got back from lunch, and my coworker opened up his Facebook on his phone, and all he had was advertisements for snow tires in his Facebook feed. And I said, whatever, and so we all opened it, and we all had the same advertisements. And it was really, really like creepy almost. But I guess at the same time, you're getting ads based on stuff you're interested in. So there's good and bads about it. Passwords and beyond, again, make sure they're unique, long, and strong. Here's a couple different examples here. Consider a phrase like, I met Sally at Lincoln High School in 1979. And then you could shorten it, as you mentioned earlier, very little. And then you've got, like I said, try to use the hashtag or unique characters in there. And obviously, capital and lowercase letters, numbers, anything to try to mix it up. One thing I'd recommend too is try to change it about once a year. They used to recommend every 3 months, and they found out the problem with that is that as you change them every 3 months, you didn't do anything complex to it. You just added another letter or character to the existing password. So best practice, some people say 6 months. I recommend a year and just make it a little more complex. And if you do that, and then when you go to change it after that year, make sure it's an entirely different password. One thing you could do too is what they call two-factor authentication. And what this is you type in your password, and then they'll send you a text message on your phone, or they send you a phone call. So a lot of banks are going to this because what this provides is a second layer of verification. So somebody could steal your password to your bank, but more than likely they do not have your cell phone or your home phone. And so what you could do, when you log in, a lot of places say choose how you want your second verification set, and it could be text, email, or a phone call. And I always recommend a phone call, and all it is an automated thing saying, did you call this, and are you looking for verification? And then you usually hit 1 if you did, and 2 if you didn't. And then once you hit the 1, it allows you into your account. And if you hit 2, it kicks that person trying to get into your account out. And the problem with that is especially in my industry, I have a lot of things tied to this, and a lot of folks will get a little lazy with this. And we actually had a test for some of our customers for the two-factor authentication, and one woman had been so used to it that we were trying to get into her account to test it, and she just blanketly just clicked 1 and let her in, and she had her account compromised without even thinking about it. So again, be very vigilant about it. Another thing I'd recommend is using a password manager. So there's several really good password managers out there. The 2 I recommend that are just fantastic and very easy to use, one is called Lastpass and the other one is called Dashlane. And these are both pieces of software that are available for your phone, your tablet, or your computer. So the nice thing is it also synchronizes across all the different devices. So you could you have a master password to get into it. And generally we recommend a very complex password for that. And then once you have that master password, it allows you to view any of your passwords, and also you can set it up so it'll log you in when you go to certain websites that require these passwords. So it's a very handy piece of software. Another thing that's becoming more and more popular are what they call biometrics. And this is face scan, like if you have an Apple phone, they call it Face ID, where you can put your face up to your phone and it unlocks it. Another one, the older Apples used to do the fingerprint scanning. A lot of computers now, like laptops, are coming with a little fingerprint swipe to them. And so it's just an extra layer because it's very hard to fake someone's, be it their face or their fingerprint. And that is it. So, any questions for anyone? Yes, sir.
When you change your password, when I change my password on my PC, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
then it says, shall I save it in Google? So in Google, that whole long list
Yep.
that it can access. Now, if somebody gets into my computer, they have all the passwords, right?
Yeah, they would. So a lot of times when you save it into Google, to view the passwords, it'll prompt you to authenticate again. So I know I use Google Chrome for my web browser, and I save my passwords using their password manager. And what it'll request me to do if I want to look up a password, I'll have to type in the password that I use to get into my computer. So if you lock your computer, which I'd recommend doing, just for, it's an extra layer of security, they'll be required if, say you left your computer unlocked and somebody came in and was trying to be nefarious and wanted to get into your passwords. Well, when they go to try to access them, it'll request that they type in the same password they used to get into your computer. And more than likely they don't know it because you just had left it unlocked for a little bit. So that's one layer of security you have. If you did use one of these password managers like this Lastpass or Dashlane, that's where you have that master password that isn't associated to anything else. So that's really what I try to recommend to people is using a third-party password manager. Yes?
So are you saying that it is kind of dangerous for me to just leave my passwords in Google memory?
It just depends on who has access to your computer. I mean, if you're out in public a lot and you go to like a Starbucks, we've seen people get their computers stolen from a table. Not me personally, but I mean it's been heard of. And so then they're able to get into that and get your different information. So, but again, if you lock your computer with some type of a password, you're generally pretty safe for the most part. Yes, ma'am.
I have Apple products.
Yep.
I can get into Keychain. Would you recommend one of these password managers? I use two-factor.
Yeah, Keychain's pretty, Apple is inherently secure by their design, and I think Keychain is just as good as some of those. So a lot of folks don't use, PCs are obviously very common, it's the most common platform, but if you're using a Mac and all Apple products, then you're on the right path. So yeah, I wouldn't change anything if I were you.
Then following up on that, today alone, I've had 2 calls that normally would come in as scam.
Mm-hmm.
One had to do with somebody's purchasing with your account Apple, the new 12.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in my experience, Apple would never
No.
send that out.
Nope, they will not. Yeah.
But then how do I get rid of some of these calls, whether they're come up as scam calls?
So,
if I block them,
yeah, if you-
then they call another number.
Well, that's the problem. It's really it's about impossible to do because what they do is they go off a pool of different numbers. So I'm in the same boat. I get a lot of scam calls like that, and you go through and block the call, but then they just call you again from another number. So it's just kind of this vicious cycle. Like I tell everybody, if you don't recognize a number, don't answer it. And then, if they have good intentions, more than likely they'll leave you a voicemail. If they don't, they won't do anything.
Which they did today.
Oh, really?
Because it didn't come up as
Yeah.
a scam. They left a message.
Huh.
And so then I get these, I had 2 of them today.
Really? Yeah, I've never heard of them leaving a voicemail. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Very
So-
interesting. Yeah, that's a new one to me because most of the time,
I kept them.
yeah,
I'll show you.
most of the time they'll call. If you don't answer, they'll just move on to the next victim per se. So,
Right.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I've been getting calls from Verizon,
Really?
and then I call that number and they say it's been disconnected.
Yeah. So
What is that?
it's just another scam. So they're trying to scam you. So if you dial 611 on your Verizon cell phone, that'll connect you right to Verizon. So if they say they're Verizon, I'd hang up and then call that number, and then that'll connect you directly with them, and then just ask them the status of your account. Because more than likely they're calling saying, "Oh, I'm from Verizon. Your bill's delinquent. Please pay me $200 right now, and we'll take credit card." And that's what they're looking to do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But even if I answer it immediately, it doesn't connect to someone verbally talking to me.
Yeah, so what I recommend for folks is because they go from what they call pools of numbers, what they're doing is they're redirecting through that pool. So when you pick up and there's any kind of a pause, hang up immediately. That's the clear-cut telltale sign that it is a scam. Like, you can always hear it. There'll be a pause, and then it'll make like a beep noise, and that's when they're transferring to the number that originated the call. And so that's really the clear telltale sign that it's a scam call. Hang up. And if it's not even a scam, even because a lot of telemarketers will do it. So if you're, if some organization wants to, ask for donations or whatever, and you don't really want to deal with it, you can always tell that there's a pause with a beep at the end, and that's when the transfer initiates. So I always like, oh, hang up. So yeah, before they even start talking. But yeah, yes, sir.
Do you recommend to, talking about my PC now, at night, I often turn it to sleep
Mm-hmm.
rather than turn it off.
Yep.
What do you recommend?
It doesn't really matter. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. So usually when it goes to sleep, it's actually sleeping, and it requires quite a bit of effort to wake it up out of sleep. But a lot of folks will just turn it off to save electricity, because even when it is sleep mode, it's still using electricity. So it's really kind of personal preference. I leave mine on all the time, and I just close the lid on my laptop, like this is my laptop. So yeah.
You talked about fine print.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes you get, they change some policy and you get fine print. Pages and pages of fine print.
Yeah.
You have to read it.
I don't read it, to be honest with you. I guess that's really more referencing, like, if you're shopping at a website and you're not familiar with the website, a lot of times we would recommend just kind of look at their return policies and whatnot, because a lot of times they'll have it written in their policies that purchases are final and there are no returns. And you may buy a product and maybe the wrong size if it's a shirt or whatnot, and because of their policies and nobody ever reads those, that you're now stuck with that purchase. So it's more just to kind of buyer beware type thing, and just be vigilant about anything you're doing on the web. So, yes.
I've also had a message sent to me saying that I have a $1,200 purchase waiting for
Oh,
me.
yeah.
Oh, is that me too?
Yeah.
From Amazon or something
Oh, yeah.
like that?
Yeah.
That's a scam.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. Amazon also will not reach out to you. So it's funny because I purchased Amazon and my card on file had expired, and only reason I knew the order didn't go through is because I logged back into Amazon and it said your payment method was declined, and then I looked at it and the expiration date on the credit card, I'd gotten a new one in the mail. So as soon as I updated it, the order went through, but they didn't make any attempts to contact me. So yeah, most of the time you won't be contacted by, I know you won't be contacted by the government, you won't be contacted by the IRS, pretty,
No Social Security.
yeah, no one from Social Security or Medicare is calling you. Very rarely do you hear from your any kind of insurance company. So, and but the thing is, so many people want to do the right thing and they don't want to be delinquent on bills and things like that. So they just naturally take the phone call, and most people are courteous, and so they'll, give the person a little bit of airtime, and then all of a sudden they've kind of fallen into the trap already. So.
I don't mean this to be a racial statement, but I get calls, and as soon as I hear their dialect, it's often foreigners.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I have listened several times, but I can tell that that's.
So the reason that is a lot of foreign countries actually have divisions of their government where they have hackers and things that are trying, like Russia, for example, has a division of its military that all they do is go around trying to hack other governments and people and things like that to exploit money for them. I know North Korea is big on it, China's big on it. A lot of these third world countries or countries that we don't see eye to eye with actually have divisions where they're out to try to scam people.
So do we have that too?
They say we don't, but I'm sure we do. So, yeah, we've got quite a bit of IT security in the back end. We're not supposed to go on the attack, only the defensive, but, who knows? Government changes all the time. So, yes?
Explain the current thing, they're holding ransomware on.
Okay, yeah, because that is very
Explain
popular.
that. What is
So,
that?
what it is somebody gets an email at a company and it says, click this link to do whatever. Well, what you do as soon as you click it, it sends a file to your computer, and then that file installs on your computer in the back behind the scenes, and then it then starts to go out to other computers in that environment, because computers, they're all what they call network together. And so one computer can talk to another one and so on and so forth. So the software will go out and start to install itself on all of them, and once it installs it, it does what they call encryption. And what it is it makes it so only the person with an encryption key can view the files. And so it locks all your files in your system out, and the only person that has access to it are the evildoers who hold this key. So it's essentially like, if you consider it like they're basically putting your computer behind a locked door, and they hold the key to it, and the only way you're able to get your information is to get that key from them, and then they want you to pay them for it. And a lot of companies, because it's becoming so prevalent, are just saying forget it, and they wipe their systems out and they restore from their backups. So you don't, I mean, it used to be very popular on a individual basis, but these cyber terrorists, as they call them, found it to be much more lucrative to hit larger companies, because they have more skin in the game. You know, an individual more likely can afford to lose a computer. Yeah, you're going to lose pictures and personal stuff and whatever, but at the end of the day, you can move on. Where businesses, they rely, IT drives most businesses today. And so because of that, they know that these businesses can't afford downtime, can't afford restoring from backups. I mean, a prime example was Steelcase got hit last year, and they had to restore more than half their systems from backups. And
How
Did they
long
pay?
does it?
they didn't pay.
How long does it take to restore a system?
It depends on the size of it. You know, it could be minutes to a day, you know, depending on the complexity and the size of the system. So yeah, it's a real pain. It really is. I mean, the thing is that because it is so lucrative and so many people do pay, that these cyber criminals are not slowing down one bit. I mean, it probably a day doesn't go by where you hear about something that's cybercrime related. And this ransomware is the new hot thing that they're all doing. Yes.
I've had it fairly often where on Facebook, I'll get a friend request from someone I'm already friends with.
Yeah, so they set up a
What is
fake
that?
account. So
Yeah.
they're setting up a fake account.
Okay.
So what it is when you go onto Facebook, even if you set all your information private, most people can see your other friends. And so what they'll do is set up a fake account that looks like your friend, like they'll steal their pictures, steal their name, and then they'll send a new friend request to you. And then what they're trying to do, as I mentioned earlier, they're trying to get personal information from you, so they can do a individualized attack to get your, you know, be it banking information, credit card information, whatever it may be. You know, they're going to try to basically build a relationship with you using a friend of yours and pretending to be them. So it's an imposter, and they may, you know, if you did friend them, they may say, oh, I'm in a real bind, you know, can you email me money or whatever it may be electronically. So they're just, you know, bad actors trying to do bad things. And so a lot of times I tell people, if you get requests on Facebook from somebody you don't know, delete it immediately. And if you get a request from somebody that you know, give them a call. Say, I got a really weird request on Facebook from you and we're already friends. And so I'd recommend delete it, call them, and then you can then have them request it again if they did happen to delete their account or whatever. So yeah, Facebook's also very problematic. There's a lot of ads that are in there. So Facebook will take ads from anybody. They don't care who it's from. And a lot of times there's ads in there that have bad pop-ups that'll then take you to another site. So that's kind of a nuisance as well. Yes?
Well, I do, literally, I deposit my checks from my computer,
Oh, yeah.
phone.
Yep, me too.
I do everything that
Yeah.
way. I'm Apple, and I got a new software called Vativity. It seems to be much more user-friendly than the old Quicken for
Oh, okay.
iOS, et cetera.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I can't say I've heard of that one.
okay.
But I mean, I know there's a bunch of them out there. Like I used to bank at Chase, now I bank at Michigan State Federal Credit Union, and they've got an app on there, so I know that it's a legitimate app. Take the picture of the check, and I know that, you know, they update it regularly, so it's secure. So, you know, really, if you stick with known apps, you'll be protected.
And Venmo?
I don't recommend Venmo to anyone, and here's why. There's no security to it. I actually got taken on a Venmo scam for $900 because I thought I was buying a bike part, and come to find out I did not get a bike part, and so thankfully I called my credit card company up and said I did not, this is a scam. And so they did what they call a chargeback, and so I was able to get my $900 back, but Venmo also is very happy to kick me off there. But if you look at the terms and conditions of Venmo, it's supposed to be money to people you know. But the problem with that is that people they can imposter your friends and family. So I do not recommend Venmo whatever, because
Young
it's
adults.
very scam easy. So yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah. Anything else?
Awesome.
Okay. Oh yes.
I'm going back to, these companies, if they have a backup,
Mm-hmm.
are the backup not accessible to them? Is that
So-
different than the regular account?
Some are, some aren't. So what we found with some of these ransomwares is that many of them, the first thing they'll target when they get into a network is to go after the backup servers. So we had a customer that was the first thing they hit. But then what customers do, if they've thought about it a little bit, they'll do what they call an offline backup, where they send it somewhere off premise, and then they're able to restore from that backup. So they have to make the connection to it. So it backs up and then it disconnects, so that ransomware can't get into that backup because there's no connection to it. So a lot of places are starting to go that way, but yeah, initially a lot of folks kept their backups in the same network that the other computers were, and the problem with that is that's the first thing these ransomwares target is the backup server, and then they're really in a bad spot. Yeah, like an external drive. Yep. And you can unplug it, and then you know you're safe. But the only problem with those those are fairly fragile. I've had more of those die. What I recommend a lot of folks, like especially for personal stuff, you could do like an Idrive. So it's like the letter idrive.com. And you can, it's a yearly service. You have a little piece of software on your phone, tablet, PC, Mac, whatever. And what it does, it backs your entire system up. And it's in what they call the cloud, and which is basically just somebody else's computer on the internet somewhere around the world. And so the nice thing is that it can do constant backups, where every time you're on your computer, everything you do, it'll back it up, or it can do scheduled backups. So you have, say you're every day at noon, your computer's going to back up data. And what it does, it looks at the data you have backed up and compares it to the data that's on your computer, and only backs up the data that's changed. So that's one of the things I'd recommend, because the problem with the hard drives too is that they can come up missing. So they either break or they can come up missing and stolen. And so the nice thing about a cloud is that a lot of times, like this iDrive service or like Apple iCloud or things like that, not only they have multiple sites around the world. So you've got the disaster recovery option there. So if one site were to burn to the ground, they've got 10 other ones around the world. So your stuff is protected. But again, just like anything else online, if you do have a backup, I know the iDrive software, I use it personally. I make sure that my password to get into my iDrive account is extremely, case sensitive, long. It's like 20 characters. That way, I know my data is very protected, because essentially that's got everything that's on my computer in the cloud, and anyone can access the cloud. So,
Where do you get that iDrive?
you go to idrive.com. It's the letter idrive.com. You go there, sign up for it, and then you can install it on your PC, your phone, whatever. So that's
You install it on all your.
I would recommend installing it on whatever you want to back up. So if you only want to back up your computer, then install it on that. If you want to back up your phone, you can install it on that. It's really, you can do everything or one thing or a few things. It's really personal preference. So I've had really good luck with that. I've used that for over a decade and just absolutely love it. It's very inexpensive. It's easy to access. The software is easy to navigate, and it's highly recommended. So yes.
It persuaded me a little bit more that I should not be using Google memory on my passwords, because I find it's convenient.
It is convenient.
I'm going to a website and it remembers. I mean, it's just right.
I guess the thing is that Google is very active in making sure their stuff is secure and up to date. So I would say it's not quite as good as one of these third-party password managers, but it's still pretty good. So as long as because your Google account is tied to your Google browser, so I'm assuming you use Google Chrome.
Yes.
So you have a Google account tied to that. So it's only going to be as secure as the password you use. So I guess I wouldn't recommend against it. Just want to make sure that your account is very secure. So maybe turn on the two-factor authentication through Google. They offer that for free. So when you would log in with your password, it would then send you a text message or a phone call. And that way you have that extra layer of security for your passwords. Because really, that's the only thing stopping a bad person from getting all your passwords. But the nice thing is I don't know if you've ever gone through your passwords and try to view them. Every time you view one, it asks for your password. And so, I've got hundreds of passwords, and you got to click a button, and then you type your password. Click another button, then you type your password. So it's very labor intensive, even if somebody were to get into it. But again, if they have your password and they've got a lot of time on their hands, they can go through every single one of your passwords. But a lot of times they probably just go through and look for banking or something that would be lucrative for them.
But now the password you're talking about is a Google password?
Yeah, so when you sign up with your web browser to synchronize everything, there's an account that you use. So it may be your personal email account. You've got to sign up, because what it does, Google, the browser doesn't sync the stuff without having an account tied to it. And so if you look at your Google browser, there's some type of email address that's tied to it. It could be a Google email address, could be Yahoo, whatever email you're using. So that account's tied to your Google browser. And so that password you use to log into Google, or the Google browser, that's going to be the level of security you have on your browser.
All right, I'll look that up. I guess I didn't know that I had a password for the Google account.
Yeah,
Except I have a password for my Google email.
Yeah, so if you have Google email, that Google email will sync with your Chrome automatically. So that's what's protecting your Google passwords, or your passwords saved in Google, I should say. So yeah, if you have Google email, that syncs with Chrome automatically, and that's your level of protection. Yeah. Anyone else?
Thank you,
Yeah, no problem.
Adam.